As I stated before, I want to welcome back anybody who's watching the interviews on our website. Keep in mind that you will be able to provide your feedback on the finalist. As I stated before, our decision is, we are taking that into consideration. The board members will be receiving the feedback from the community. The community can submit their feedback by going to the superintendent search page, and that is going to be on the district website. There is a QR code that is in that website that you can use for your convenience to provide the feedback. And once again, we'll receive that before our final decision. Welcome to the interview. We are excited that you are here. I'd like to introduce all board members. So I'll start with introducing Board Member Cahoon from District 4. Vice Chair Booth from District 5, Board Member Arguello from District 3, and Board Member Melendez from District 2. I am Board Member Castillo from District 1. So for this process, we will have a full 90 minutes of our interview today. We will start by giving you 3 minutes to give your opening statement and anything you'd like us to know before we get started. Each board member will ask a series of questions in a block of 15 minutes. And they're going to be related to our strategic plan. We will ask about 4 to 5 questions, although the number of questions that we ask depends on how long you take to answer those questions. And at the end, you will have some time to give your ending statement or ask any questions or thoughts that you may have before we end today. So we will start by giving you your 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Well, thank you. I am Terry Connor. I currently serve as the Deputy Superintendent in Hillsborough County Public Schools. I'm humbled to be here today, considered a finalist. I want to thank you for taking the time to choose me as a finalist. It is definitely an honor. I also want to thank FSBA, who is here today and has been very supportive through this process. And lastly, I really want to take time to thank my wife, who is here supporting me today. She has made several personal and professional sacrifices to allow me to pursue this calling of educational leadership. And I just thank her for, I hope you get to spend some time with her, because I think you will like her a lot more than you like me, and that will help me in the process. So I want to share, I know you've had an opportunity to look at my resume and my materials, and I don't want to recap all of those experiences. I really want to highlight 3 things that I think you should know about me. The first is my passion, why I do this work, what drives me to do this work. Secondly, my track record of success. And thirdly, my vision for your superintendent here in Osceola County. So my passion, what drives me to this work? Every day I get to get up and make decisions for 225,000 students that impact their lives. And I take that very seriously. I know that the decisions that I make, I center them on making sure I'm providing the best educational opportunities for students so that they can be prepared to be full option graduates. Whether they choose a career, they go to college, or a military option, that's my responsibility, and I am so thankful to have that, and I'm I take it very seriously. I was a first-generation college student. I came from a family who didn't have the financial means, that didn't really know how to navigate the system, and because of teachers in my life that worked with me and helped shape my trajectory, I owe it to them from why I'm here today. And that is what drives this work. Those conversations that you have with a child outside of class are so impactful because they can change a student's life. And I was an example of that. And so that drives me each and every single day. And it's why I became a teacher, so that I could do the same. And I went back and taught in the school where I was a student so I could help students who are in the same circumstance as me. And that has been a wonderful privilege. Secondly, my track record. I have had the blessing to serve as the number 2 in 2 school districts here in Florida, Clay County and Hillsborough County. As the number 2, I have been a part of all of the executive decisions related to operations, finance, human resources, and definitely academics, serving as the chief academic officer in both counties. So I know that I'm prepared holistically to move into the role of superintendent. I have a very successful track record in improving student achievement. In Clay County, we moved the academic state ranking from 20th to 8th. In Hillsborough County, we moved the academic ranking from 36th to 19th in 2 short years under the conditions of the pandemic. When we arrived to Hillsborough County, we had historical DNF schools of about 28 schools that had just persistently been DNF. We were able to reduce those schools down to 4 in just 2 years. Also, persistently low-performing schools. Those are schools that have been below a C 3 out of the last 5 years. Hillsborough had the highest in the state, 39. We reduced that down to 18 in 2 years, and we're on track to continue to reduce that down. So that track record has just led me to know that I know what the effective components are to help a school district move to the next tier. And when I see my vision for this county to see Osceola at 41, I know we can be a top 20 district. We can be a top 10 district, and we can take that top spot. We just got to leverage the great partnerships that already exist in this county. In doing my research, we have some strong community partners, and you have dedicated staff here. 2 essential ingredients to move the needle. We just got to bring it all together in a systems approach to move this district to an A district and to number 1. And that's what I'm excited, and that's what I'm here today for. And I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. I will start with a question for academic success. High performance by students and accountability are priorities for the board. How would you assess the current student performance levels in Osceola County? How would you assess the effectiveness of our teachers and programs?
So assessing the current student performance starts with looking at the numbers. We got to look at the data. So I would first bring the cabinet together to talk about what are our current data systems that we have in place. I know that we have our state progress monitoring data systems, but what internal data systems are we using within the district to progress monitor in faster cycles? I want to look at that data to make sure it's reliable, but I'm going to analyze that to see what are the trends and patterns that we can identify so that we can triage those areas very, very quickly. So it's bringing team members who are familiar with our current systems, assessing the viability of those systems, making sure that the data is telling us the story, the complete story. Well, we know numbers don't tell the complete story. We've got to get out and actually visit classrooms. We got to see the curriculum and how students are responding to the curriculum. We got to talk to our teachers. We got to get their feedback and tell us what's working, what's not working. So conversations with teachers, administrators, looking at the numbers, making sure the data systems are there. And I would also say, in terms of teacher performance, I want to evaluate your current rubric, looking at what are the things we're holding our teachers accountable for, and are they highest leverage? Or are they more compliance types of things? We want the evaluation rubric to really focus on the learning environment of the classroom and the instructional pedagogy that is occurring in the classroom. So those 2 components, I want to look deeply to make sure that we have evidence-based, we're building our rubrics on evidence-based research. And that way we can go through the process and determine then what do we find as the priority for our students and what is going to meet their individual needs. So it's examining that, it's being in those classrooms and looking at the trends of those evaluations as well, I think too. In Hillsborough, we have a dashboard that actually that information is entered and we can see at a larger scale what are some of the trends and patterns we're seeing in terms of instructional ratings, and then that helps drive professional development. But looking at that holistically and then drilling down into pockets where we may need to send intense support will be very, very important.
Thank you. The next question is surrounding talent management. What have you measured, how have you measured the staff's performance in the past? And how has that measurement resulted in improvement in the performance?
So I'll go back to more of start with the formal approach and then talk about the informal approach, where I think coaching conversations actually have more impact sometimes than the formal approach. But in a formal manner, we're going to have a cycle of evaluation processes, right? We know that teachers, whether they're in the first 3 years, may have a frequency of evaluation that's more than, say, a veteran teacher who has been demonstrating effective instructional practice over the years. So I think that formal process needs to really laser-like focus on the actual moves that a teacher's making in the classroom that's lending itself to improve student achievement. We don't need to focus on peripheral things that aren't having an impact on that, because that frustrates our teachers. When they know we trust our teachers to make the right instructional decisions, and their evaluation should reflect those decisions. On an informal approach, though, I want to see through conversations and those visits in there how teachers are responding to the coaching and the feedback that they're getting on a daily basis. That's really where I think change happens. Sometimes in the formal side, you see a dog and pony show, because we know what's happening and we know how to put it together, and we can put on what we need to put on for the observation. But the real growth that occurs is when I'm coming in a coaching capacity, either as an administrator or an instructional coach, and I'm working with you and I'm doing whisper coaching and I'm providing you feedback, and we're using that to potentially create a coaching cycle. Those are the things that make the real impact, I believe, a lot more times than the formal evaluation.
Thank you. This question is surrounding safety and security. How would you ensure that the climate assessment results are used in school improvement plans across the district?
So I do believe it is important that we have an expectation in our school improvement planning that climate and culture is a part of that planning. Like, if a school is going to be efficient and effective and make an impact, you cannot neglect climate and culture. It's part of that formula. So I would have an expectation that we would have regular cycles to receive input from our staff about how they are responding to the environment in which they work, how are students responding to the learning environment, what are the support mechanisms in place for employees. I see a lot of teachers leaving the profession right now because they don't feel supported in the classroom. And so we've got to ensure that we equip our leaders, because they're the front lines. They're the ones that are daily leading the work in their schools and interacting with their teachers. So equipping them with as much resources as we can to support the individual needs of their teachers so that they want to remain and they feel supported, I think is extremely, extremely important. So I would expect that we have regular cycles. I would expect that we involve the stakeholders in that process. They should be at the table talking about, okay, this is what we see as a trend in our school. What are the next steps? What are some strategies? We should be providing schools researched, evidence-based strategies to address climate and culture in their schools. That's an important piece, because we can't expect them to pull things out of the air. They just can't pull ideas. We want to use evidence-based research. And so providing them that and then making sure it is incorporated in the school improvement plan, absolutely necessary, got to happen. Because that's when the assistant superintendents can have those continual conversations with their principals around the way of work, how they're progressing with their culture in their school, and then making adjustments and seeing where the district may need to come in and support. If we're seeing a climate issue in a particular school, maybe there's more disruptive behaviors, teachers don't feel supported, could be a leadership issue. That data we need to have at our fingertips so that we can react at a moment's notice. We don't need to wait to the end of the year when the results come in. We've got to have some faster frequencies so that we can get in there and with some urgency help address those issues, because we don't want to lose students, we don't want to lose teachers, and we don't want to lose good leaders.
Thank you. I may forego one question because I have a follow-up with regards to your three-prong approach, which is regular cycles, involvement of stakeholders, and incorporation. What about the accountability aspect? So once the plan is incorporated, how would you ensure that accountability and follow-up is done?
Thank you for that part of the question. It does come down to the assistant superintendents and the superintendent, those at the district level that oversee principals, are having those data chats, having that conversation and holding principals accountable. It would be built in to their evaluation rubric. so the principals would understand that that's how important this is. It has to happen. And so it would be built into their formal evaluation.
Thank you. The next question is surrounding fiscal responsibility. How would you prioritize additions or cuts to the budget?
I'm always going to prioritize the classroom and the students first. That is the priority. When we're looking at additions, do those additions make sense for us? What will be the return on investment? Will it actually have an impact on student achievement? Is it going to support the teacher? So those are things you gotta have that conversation from the start. If we're proposing new allocations to our budget, that research has to be vetted. We have to understand what is the expected outcome for any additions we make, because we're funded at low levels in the state of Florida, and in terms of, we're barely able to meet the actual needs that we have. So if we're proposing actual additions to it, it has to make sense, because somewhere we may have to be making cuts for that. And in terms of cuts, it's important that non-essentials that aren't impacting the classroom go first, not anything that's going to impact instruction. I think we have to look at alternative revenue sources. One of the things that we've done, I walked into Hillsborough County 3 months in, April of 2020, right in the midst of the initiation of the pandemic, and we found out that we had a $150 million deficit facing us. So we had to make some decisions. So we did all the non-essentials first. We froze the budgets. We froze travel. We froze hiring, unless it was a critical need. And we really scrutinized all of those pieces before, to make sure it wasn't hitting anything in the classroom. That was the main thing. And then we even got to the point, because it was $150 million, that we started a furlough. And we furloughed district staff, not school-based staff. Because again, the last thing we should be touching are school level. And so looking at all of those alternatives that are not essential to the impact of students, I think is key. Finding alternative sources where we can move things off the general into grant funding, looking at Title II, Title III, Title IV, anywhere we can move positions. And if we want to have additional allocations, to go back to that point, that's the place we want to look first. Where can we add on the the grant funding and federal program side than on the general side?
Thank you. You have about 2 minutes to answer my last question. Okay. How does a superintendent ensure academic programs meet the needs of the local community? Do I need to repeat that?
I think I have it. Thank you. That's an important question, because in Hillsborough County, school choice, I'm a big believer in school choice and making sure that we're meeting the needs of our constituents. And that requires us to be competitive. It requires us to be in touch with the community, because if we're going to sit back and kind of, get upset that people are leaving our schools or going to charters or going to private, this is a competitive environment. We need to work to be the first choice for our parents. And so if there's a need in the community, and we do a lot of evaluations, we go out and we actually do outreach. We go to the community. That's the first piece of that. Going out and actually talking to constituents and see what it is, and gathering that feedback and really having some discussion as a board, as a cabinet, to talk about what options lay before us as a result of this feedback that we received. And in our case, we just launched our first Montessori program in Hillsborough County. There was a need. We knew that there were Montessoris popping up in the area. We wanted to be competitive. We knew the community wanted it. There was some concern whether at that time we would actually fill those seats. It went on a waiting list the day we opened up registration. So just being in touch, getting some data, getting the feedback, looking at your budget allocations, that has to be an important piece, because the community can want a lot of things. If you don't have the funding to do it, you got to be, strategic about that. So we were able to do that, launched it at the K level, and we're growing that year by year. So by, in the next 6 years, we're going to have a full-blown Montessori school. And that was a result of the community saying, this is what we want.
Do we still have to have, no? Okay, follow-up question for later. Thank you. I'm going to move it over to our representative from District 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again, Mr. Connor, for being here. We appreciate your answers. And I'm sorry, we're kind of speeding up a little bit because so much good material that we want to cover. What are your thoughts on triple I time? I mean, that might be something that we call it here, but our time for interventions. And basically, how does a district set aside time to catch up students who are behind?
Looking to learn more about triple I time, I will tell you that is new. That is a new term in my vocabulary. But I will tell you, interventions themselves have to be strategic. They have to be planned. They have to be built into the schedule. So I do believe that is an essential piece. And they have to be. You have to have the right resources aligned to the actual needs of students during that time. It's one thing to dedicate time to intervention. It's another thing to have fidelity to the right evidence-based resources to actually impact student achievement. So I would be really interested in looking at what are the actual resources, what professional development have we actually given to teachers to actually move the needle for students. I'm a huge believer that you keep students out of intervention when you have a strong core Tier 1 instruction model going on. That's critical. If you don't have strong Tier 1, you're going to continue to have more and more kids in Tier 2 and Tier 3 to the point you're not going to be able to have an impact because we have very limited resources. So I dedicate a lot of time with strong Tier 1 instruction, building the capacity of not only the teachers, but the leaders, because the leaders are the ones who are supporting their teachers on a daily basis. I do not believe leaders should be just operational managers. They should be instructional leaders. They have to be in the classrooms, coaching, understanding what the curriculum is, how to leverage their resources, coaches, district resources to help support teachers. When we're doing that in a coordinated strategy, that's less time we need to be in intervention. So we need to just make sure, first off, when we do have students in intervention, that they're appropriately placed in there. That's critical. And that teachers are supported with the right resources that are evidence-based. And that's it on my question. Thank you.
Excellent. Our teachers' salaries are impacted by the state. They kind of dictate, steps and everything like that. However, our other employee categoricals are not. How do you plan on reviewing our compensation schedule for all the other employees, like administrative salaries, steps, and for everyone else, as far as, compression and equity? I know it's a very specific question to us because we have a point where, to help you out a little bit, is that we don't even post job salaries on the website because it depends on so many factors on where they're coming in. So how would you model that or refine our salary schedule for non-instructional employees?
So I haven't had a chance to look at the salary schedules in detail, but from a point of something you mentioned there, something that sparks my interest that I would look for in that particular salary schedule, it seems like it's very, very complicated. Is there an opportunity to actually uncomplicate that salary schedule? In Hillsborough County, when we went to the $15 minimum and we started to implement that, we started having issues with compressed salaries, and then we had to address that issue as well. So I want to take a deep dive into your current compensation plans to see where there are opportunities to maybe simplify that, not to hurt anyone who is currently on the system, who are on those models. They should all remain. There should never be in that adjustment. No one should be falling backwards. It should always be moving forwards. We don't pay our staff enough, and we have to continue to be committed to ensuring that they receive every dollar that they have truly earned. I think, too, I go back to the fact of those salaries are really derived out of the general fund. So where can we, again, maximize our resources outside of the general fund? I'm a big believer that we should never be sending any money back to the state on our grants. We should spend every penny that we have. So I would look to see how the budgets are currently being funded. What are the funding sources? How may we be able to transfer some of that, offset the cost off of general, onto the grants, so that we can free up reoccurring dollars to actually compensate our staff. And so those are two things that I would do. Research, do an evaluation, see where there are opportunities, bring in our bargaining units. They have to be at the table with us. I'm a true believer in collaboration with our bargaining units to understand what ideas do they have, what can they bring to the table, where can we simplify, how do we find alternate resources to bring into the compensation plan and look to do that. So those would be a few things that I would do.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on the use of school guardians versus SROs or law enforcement officers? And what do you think about the district potentially standing up its own force?
So this is a personal question because I've actually in Clay County have been a part of that process where we did stand up our own police force. So I know that comes with a lot of, there's a lot of consternation sometimes in that process because I first and foremost believe having an armed asset on our campus, I mean, by law we have to have it, but I believe it's necessary. And I truly believe in the professionalism of our law enforcement agencies and their expertise to be in our schools. And I think that's an important piece, that as much and often as possible that we can have our law enforcement agencies and our municipalities participate with us and partner with us, because sometimes these issues that happen in schools they trickle out into the community. And we want to make sure that there's a continuum of services and connection with our law enforcement agencies. I am a proponent of the guardian system, not in lieu of an armed law enforcement. Like, I want that as the first step. If we need, because funding, whatever the case may be, we need to supplement and have guardians in our school for certain specific reasons, I'm a proponent of that. I think we should do that. There should be an armed asset at every campus. In Clay County, and this was back in 2018 with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and we had just passed a referendum, and it wasn't that we had a bad relationship with our law enforcement agencies there, but there was some funding issues around how we could have this reoccurring cost with our current contracts with our law enforcement agencies. And that's where it got to a point where it made more sense for us to stand up our own police department. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. I'm not saying that that's something that I would want to do. I honestly would want to look at our current contracts and relationship with our law enforcement and make sure that we can strengthen that piece, because I believe those experts in our schools are very, very important.
Awesome. In regards to our fiscal responsibility, we have our own healthcare clinic in an attempt to lower the cost. How can we further reform our healthcare model by providing quality care, but also reduce the costs, which are ultimately borne to our staff members?
Yeah, I've been fortunate in the districts I worked at to ensure that we have, at least at the employee level, single employee, that their cost for health insurance is covered by the district. And I would be committed to working in every which way and looking at every opportunity. And I'm not sure if you're self-insured at the moment, but maybe it's looking at how we can become self-insured. Do we need to do an RFP to see what available services are out there that we can not diminish the level of service, but just get the same or better service at a lower cost? So an RFP model would definitely be something that I would be interested in looking at. I want to hear from our constituents. I wouldn't come in and make any changes until I heard from all of our stakeholders about what are the benefits, what do you like about the current system? How can we offset costs? I know my current system, we have well-being campaigns, because the healthier your staff is, the less you're going to incur in liabilities for health insurance. And so I would be a proponent of having champions, wellness champions, and making sure that that piece is in place and providing incentives for our employees who are reaching certain milestones with healthcare throughout the year. But just uncovering every stone, I think, is important, because healthcare costs continue to go up, they continue to go up, and we have to ensure that we're doing our fiduciary responsibility to make sure we're not diminishing the level of service, but we're also getting a cost-effective service as well.
And this kind of leads into my final question, or I might do a follow-up one after that. As far as community engagement, let's say you are presented with something like that. What do you think about the use of focus groups or committees that just don't have staff, but also have like general community members who may be experts in that field or whatever, kind of, participating with district decisions? And not just in healthcare, but what other areas would you look at that? And if they made a recommendation contrary to what your popular belief is, would you be willing to follow through on some of the recommendations?
So I'm a big believer in consensus. And I'm a big believer in evidence and research. And I know there are times where you may have to make a decision, a difficult decision that's contrary based on the information that you have. But I think consensus is the way you operate. To go to your point around committees, it's absolutely great, in my opinion, to have as many perspectives on a committee that can lend to the conversation, because that only makes us better. The more information we have, so if we have an internal stakeholder group, we have external stakeholder groups they're representing, that's good practice. We want to make sure we're getting as much information and then making the best decision on that information. And that only comes through bringing as many people to the table and getting expert opinions. So I'm a proponent of having external partners sitting on committees to help us. But ultimately, as the superintendent, I'm responsible for the decision, and this board is responsible for the decisions that we make. And so we collectively, in consensus, will make those decisions. Even sometimes, it may go against the committee's recommendation, although that's not the default. We want to make those decisions in collaboration with our committees as much and often as possible.
And let me ask the last question here that's a little bit difficult for you. I'm looking at my time. I got 3 minutes. All right. The other candidates have PhDs. You do not, but I love your answer so far. But I want to quelch that for everyone here. Why should that PhD not be the determining factor why you should be selected superintendent versus someone else?
Well, I definitely do respect everybody who has pursued that, and that is something that I'm still looking to pursue in my journey as an educational leader. I will tell you, I have been put into experiences that I've taken the priority with my family and having 2 children, with the level of responsibility that I have in serving as number 2, and making sure that every day I'm fully committed to making those decisions in the best interest of students, has not afforded me that opportunity to start that work. But it is something that is definitely on the back of my mind to pursue, because I know that's important. So I respect those who do it. I think, though, more than anything else, you need someone who's been there, who is battle tested, who is day one ready. Someone who has experienced it at all levels, who knows all the facets of the organization. That, I think, should weigh more in a decision for who is the superintendent of Osceola than someone who has a degree.
I yield my time.
Thank you. The next set of questions will come from Board Member Arguello from District 3.
Hi, Mr. Connor.
How you doing?
I agree with you. I think Elon Musk said that if somebody walked into his office with an MBA, he wouldn't hire him. Experience is just so much more valuable these days than sitting in a classroom, and I couldn't agree more. Besides, you've been hitting home runs on these questions all morning. So these questions might be a little bit more difficult than the standard ones you hear in education. I'm very skeptical of public education as it's delivered today. Obviously, you're a believer in it, right? Being a practitioner. So school districts, by and large, have failed the American public so far. Today, proficiency rates of 50% are acceptable. To me, none of my children scoring 50% in any level of proficiency in any subject matter would ever be acceptable to me. So for someone like myself who is a skeptic, and someone like me who is not willing to pretend that 50% is a good number for our public school system in terms of a measurement or metric of success, how can the public of Osceola County have confidence that you're going to perform at a level that is acceptable to families when you tell them what their level of proficiency is?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the insight into your beliefs, because I would agree, and I don't think anyone would disagree, that when half of our students are failing, that we're being successful. I don't think we can come to that conclusion. So I would agree with you on that point. I have dedicated all of my career, especially as an educational leader, and even in the classroom as a teacher, to ensure that students have access to those opportunities, the best educational opportunities that we can provide them. Sometimes students don't take advantage of that, and sometimes as a district, the system's set up where students don't have access to that, and that is a problem. So my commitment, first and foremost, because I'm a true believer that having the highest expectations of our students, providing them the appropriate grade level work on a consistent basis, and making sure that we couple that with strong instructional practice, and they're deeply engaged in that work, is the recipe to break through that 50% proficiency. That is easier said than done, but that's what I've committed my life's work to, especially having served as Chief Academic Officer in Clay and in Hillsborough. And it starts, I believe, with good leadership in the schools. I will spend a lot of time with principals and assistant principals as your superintendent, because research is clear. The largest impact on student achievement within a school starts at the top with the leader, second to the high-quality teacher that's actually in the classroom. So you will see me working closely in building their capacity as instructional leaders. Are we facilitating a culture of learning in each of our classrooms? It shouldn't happen in this classroom and not in this classroom. There has to be consistency. That's why we're seeing some achievement and some not. It has to ensure that every student has the option to access a high-quality curriculum with rigorous expectations. One of the things that frustrates me so much is if I walk into a self-contained classroom and see the level of expectation not as high or equivalent to what's happening in a general ed classroom. That shouldn't be the case. And so the consistency from classroom to classroom to classroom, making sure there's rigorous content and assignments, and making sure kids are actually owning their learning and being able to demonstrate that at high levels is the way we're going to break the cycle. That's how we break the cycle. Does it happen overnight? Absolutely not. I've been doing this now for 7 years at the district level, and we have made progress, and we make that incremental progress. And I do believe you celebrate that progress, because this is complex work. It's not easy. So while we don't celebrate 50% of failure, we do celebrate the hard work that our teachers and our principals are doing on a daily basis. And when we see that incremental growth, we got to celebrate it.
Okay. My next question is regards to talent management. Osceola County has a pretty terrible record when it comes to talent management. Our teachers are upset, morale is low. The way that you get a job in Osceola County is by graduating high school with someone. There's not a lot of fresh air and fresh life in this district. How will you breathe new life into our district and combat the environment where everyone just appears to grow up together, and that's how you get a job here?
That's an important question, because this is a people business, and we have to have the highest quality people in our positions to make the best impact. I'm a true believer in developing people. I'm a true believer in ensuring that people are continuously improving on their practice, and they're growing, and they're seeking those opportunities. I'm not a believer in people sitting in a position for 20 years and being stagnant. And I have had opportunities where that has happened in previous districts, where someone has sat in the assistant principal pool and has been there, or in the ranks of an assistant principal for 20 years, never aspired to move and grow as a principal, And it's clogged the pipeline for people to move who are ready and willing and ready to go, but they can't move because someone's clogging that pipeline. We can't do that. So there's got to be crucial conversations in situations like that. We've got to not be afraid to have those conversations. And I think when you get really comfortable in a situation and you get to know people, it becomes harder and harder to have those conversations. So I would be committed to making sure that we're having people, we would give opportunities for growth, and that we would demonstrate that growth, and that there would be a continuous improvement mindset, and making sure that we are evaluating in a transparent and an accurate manner. We shouldn't just be passing on an evaluation every year and saying, good job, here you go. We need to actually have those crucial conversations. When we see areas of opportunity where you need to grow, this is what needs to happen. Let's talk about it. Let's create a plan. Let's support each other to do that. Giving as much opportunity for that, and then if it comes to a point where we don't see progress, then that's a different conversation. And that's how you begin to change a system in the area of talent management.
In regards to fiscal responsibility, would you commit to a deep financial audit of the finances here in Osceola County if you ever become superintendent?
I would be committed to looking at our current audits. I know the state and the Office of Attorney, of General's office up in Tallahassee does their audits. I would be committed to first looking at that. If at that point there was evidence that there needs to be a deeper dive, then I think that has to be on the table for sure. I'm not a proponent to jump in and say we got to do a deep forensic audit. I will be gathering a lot of information during my transition, and one of those is going to be heavily on finances. I'm going to be talking to all of the internal stakeholders, reviewing every comprehensive audit that's already been occurring, looking line by line. If I start to see something that's startling to me that requires us to move in that direction, I would be open to doing it, but I don't think that's the default from the start.
In regards to community engagement, the chief reason for community engagement is to build trust with families who allow us to exist. And so many of the opportunities for a true community engagement in Osceola County have been sullied by stacking committees and surrounding leadership with yes men, cronies, and loyalists. How will you surround yourself with the most talented people as opposed to those who tell you just what you want to hear?
My leadership style has always been to surround myself with people who are going to push our thinking. That's how we stay fresh. That's how we stay on our toes. I will tell you, we get in our cabinets right now as a leadership team, and there's no bobbleheads. When we bring forth an initiative, we have a critical decision that needs to be made, we scrimmage is what we call it. We look at every facet. We push back on each other. That helps you arrive at the best answer. And so I don't want to have bobbleheads surrounding me. And if I feel that that was the case, then I would have those conversations and we talk about where it would be a better fit. But my executive team need to push until we get to the best answer. No bobbleheads, no yes men. Scrimmaging is a good thing, and that helps the organization as a whole. And I'm sure there's no bobbleheads on this board either, so.
You've seen our meetings.
Have you? Okay, regarding safety and security, this may seem irrelevant, but it's highly relevant here in this district. We've had instances of a disconnect between reporting of bad acts and then acting on those bad acts in some kind of remedial way, or remediating those bad acts. Would you commit to a third-party ombudsman for all sexual misconduct, fraud, waste, and abuse allegations to secure the safety of our students and employees?
If I can assume you are asking for a full-time ombudsman or just, so I'm familiar, and there's been cases in my current district where we have brought in a third-party investigator in situations. And I think there may be times when that's necessary if we feel there could be some contamination or there's something that's not right in terms of the investigation. And so I would be committed to looking at every individual case as it is, and then looking to see if there is a need to bring someone in to do a third-party evaluation or investigation. It's really contextual. I wouldn't say today that I think it's necessary to have someone full-time, because those situations are very specific, and I would want to do my due diligence before saying this is an additional allocation we need to have until we look at that.
Okay. And if you saw that there was an issue with the reporting mechanisms that we have currently in the district, what would your response be?
I would definitely want to understand what processes, where was the breakdown in the process with that particular division? So I would do an investigation of sorts to see what happened. Why did we not follow protocol? Do we have solid policies and procedures? Are we following those policies and procedures to a T, especially in cases like this? So those are things that I want to look for and address those from a human resources perspective. If we continue to see trends and patterns where policy and procedures, especially in investigation, are not being followed, that rises to a whole nother level of conversation for the people who are actually doing that investigation.
Okay, thank you. I'll use the rest of my time.
Thank you. The next set of questions will be from Board Member Cahill from District 4.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You have addressed some strategies already related to academic success, but how would you look at other strategies to raise test scores and reading levels in our lowest quartile students in all areas, high school, middle school, and elementary school?
I'll go back to what I said from the beginning around a strong Tier 1 core. I'm a true believer that if we get Tier 1 right, then we can address this very specific needs of our lower quartile. When it comes to lower quartile, it has to be very tailored and specific and personalized for those students, but not in the absence of a high-quality, consistent exposure to grade-level work. Students who are low quartile readers need ample opportunity to read. They should be reading, and they should be stretched in that reading. So we're going to find that uncomfortable spot where they could comprehend text, but it's stretching them a little bit, and we're going to continue to build on that and build on that and build on that, and that's what's going to help improve their ability and to comprehend more complex text. I think building background knowledge for those students is critical, because if I can connect to past experiences and things that I already am familiar with, it helps me comprehend. I want to make sure our teachers have the appropriate resources. They feel supported in addressing the very specific needs of their lower quartile students. I want to look at the current progression of courses in our schools to see what curriculum is being provided. Is it evidence-based? Is it a knowledge-building curriculum? What supplemental materials, Tier 2 and 3, are we employing to ensure that we're getting some data consistently and using that data in a collaborative manner during planning time to actually prescribe interventions for students? Those are all critical pieces that I'm going to look for, and I've had success in moving lower quartiles when all of those pieces are working in concert.
Thank you. In regards to talent management, what steps would you take to create a culture of high expectations in our employees?
Yeah, I think high expectations is probably a theme that you've heard from me. I have high expectations of myself first, and I'm going to lead by example. So I'm never going to expect more from anyone that I don't expect from myself. That culture has to be fostered. It has to be cultivated. You have to just expect that from, it's just a level of expectation that we have. And so that, I would start there. It's just fostering that and building upon that, celebrating the fact that people are making achievements and are demonstrating high expectations, I think is really critical. If you would repeat that question one more time for me.
Just what steps would you take to create a culture of high expectations for our employees?
Yeah, I go back to what I said earlier about principals and really spending a lot of time with them and talking about what those, being clear in their roles as a principal, that it's not just operational expert, but that you are a talent manager, you are a culture builder, you are an instructional leader, and what does that look like? We spend a lot of time in doing that. When the principal is leading from a level of high expectations, then they can help transfer that down to their staff. And that's how you scale across this district. Superintendent can't sit in the chair up here and expect things are going to happen. There has to be systems and processes in place to scale those expectations and scale that across the district. And it starts for me with principals, because there's a principal at every school and they're the leaders of their building and they are responsible for building a culture in their school. And that's how we're going to get everyone to operate with a culture of high expectations.
Thank you. For safety and security, what have you found to be the most effective strategies to address students' social, emotional, or other non-academic challenges in collaboration with parents?
One more time. If you say that.
What have you found to be the most effective strategies to address student social, emotional, or other non-academic challenges in collaboration with parents?
I think first you have to be proactive. We have to have a system in place where we're collecting data about how our students are feeling. In Hillsborough County, we do that 3 times a year. That data then has to actually be acted upon. So we're going to act upon that data. We're meeting to talk about the trends and patterns that we're seeing in our schools, and then being intentional about programs that we offer in our schools. We are really big on resiliency in Hillsborough County. We're really big around mindset, and we have a program called 7 Mindsets that we implement, and it helps students with those coping skills. It helps them when they're having challenges, but being connected to an adult is extremely important. So do students understand that they have someone in their school that they can talk to when there are challenges with well-being? So do our teachers understand the signs and are aware of that? We know that teachers have to be youth mental health first aid trained in our schools, not teachers, but 80% of our staff have to be trained. And that should help us in seeing those signs and then connecting them to the appropriate resources and outside of school. We do a lot with our mental health dollars, we spend a lot on climate and culture resource teachers and mental health counselors, and put those in our schools because the varying challenges that we do see in each of our schools. And those climate and culture resource teachers are there in a proactive manner to work with teachers to help develop or to help them in terms of the social emotional piece. And so it's being coordinated in that strategy. But to go to the parent piece, we have to connect them and be a conduit to connecting them, because sometimes they don't know how to navigate those resources. I can tell you, when a mental health challenge happens, it is not easy. The phone tree that you go through to try to connect to resources and you get pawned to this, we've got to streamline that process so that there's a one-stop shop. As a parent, and I need to be connected to whatever service, social services, food pantries, whatever that is, there should be a one-stop shop. And there are ways that we can do this, where we can connect them and kind of pull out the bureaucracy, eliminate that, so that they can get connected with urgency.
Thank you. My next question on fiscal responsibility is multi-pronged. So I want you to think about a large critical budgetary decision you've made in the past. What was the situation? What decision did you make, and who did you involve in it? What was the analysis or information that you gathered to support your decision-making process, and what was the impact of your decision on the school district? I can repeat as needed if you want.
All right, I'll get started and then we'll see what we need to do. So the largest budget that I oversee right now is our ESSER funding. I am responsible as the oversight of $675 million in our district. You can imagine there is a lot of project management that goes into making those types of decisions. And they can't be just made in a vacuum, because those funds were designated to address the fallout from COVID, learning loss, mental health, staff issues. All of those things have to be considered. It's technology. So what I did is I thought it was very important to create a task force that involves all of the stakeholders within that are going to be impacted by these funds. So we had cabinet level positions that were sitting on that. We had departments and supervisors from different areas sitting on that task force. And then we wanted to ensure that the community was involved in that piece too. So we had 10 virtual town halls to get input about how are we going to expend $675 million. And there needs to be accountability to that piece, so we wanted them to be involved in that. They gave us some very good feedback, and we incorporated that as we started to decide what initiatives we were going to pursue. It's important that you have a very structured protocol when you're doing that, and that starts with making sure it's aligned to the priorities, because there's so many things you can do, but are they going to work for reaching the vision and the priorities that we have outlined in our strategic plan? So anything that's brought to the committee has to be vetted and aligned to the strategic plan, and it has to be evidence-based. So in this task force, as proposals were being brought forth, it was very much like a Shark Tank scenario, where you now are going to propose this item. What is it addressing? What is the evidence you used? What is the expected outcome? What is the sustainability once ESSER's done? Is it going to end? How are we going to continue it? And so it goes through this process, and all of those committee members make a recommendation whether this is something we believe is going to actually benefit our district. And I enjoyed that work. We replicated that task force mechanism in other areas because we were so successful with that. But I think getting that community piece involved, because that was a big piece, and then getting the input from each of those and having a vetting process is extremely important. Was there another part of the question that still needs to be addressed?
I mean, I think you answered all of it, but I can repeat if you want to go anywhere else. You explained the situation, you explained who you involved, what analysis or information did you gather to support your decision-making process, and what was the impact of your decision? I don't know if you want to share more on the impact, but I think you pretty much answered it.
Yeah, I'll just use one example on impact. You know, we did a huge investment. One of the things COVID revealed for us is we were woefully prepared for the technology needs of our district, way behind, very antiquated, 28,000 computers for 200,000 students when I arrived. So you can imagine the challenges we had there. So we did a huge investment to bring us up to the 21st century in technology, and that was a great outcome of that task force, because we vetted everything from infrastructure needs, professional development, the hardware that went with it. That was a success for us.
Great, thank you. My final question is, what do you see the role of the superintendent in a district like ours as it relates to employee groups, students, and the community?
I think first off, I have to be a visionary leader. I think a superintendent should have vision, should be out as the key communicator out in front of those particular stakeholders, that you're leading by example, and we're not sitting at the district office just dictating what we want to do. But we're out and about, we're listening to our stakeholders, we're problem solving, and we're not just paying lip service, we're actually incorporating their feedback in decisions that we make as a school district. I'm a big believer on that. Sometimes we have to acknowledge that this is the way things are, and this is the way we have to move, and we acknowledge that. We show empathy to our stakeholders if there's issues with that. But every chance we can, we should be incorporating what they're telling us into our decisions, so it validates our credibility with the public. But I think as a leader, you have to be someone who is visible, who's out front, who's visionary, and is motivating and inspiring not only the internal stakeholders, but the external, to really build that credibility of the community and the trust for our district.
Thank you.
Last but not least. Right. Hi.
Hello.
Academic success. I know that through the questions I get to go last here. So again, we talked a lot about academic success in our Tier 1 structure, but I'm going to hit a little bit on how you will ensure students achieve the higher levels in every school, meaning the students that aren't in Tier 1, that need to be that Tier 1, but the students that need that gifted or that extra, what are we doing for those students? What do you see?
So I oversee gifted in
Okay.
our district, so I do have experience with that. I think it starts with a screening process. I'm a big believer of making sure there is full representation of our student demographics in our gifted programs. That's a big piece, that we're not excluding students for some reason or another. So I am a big proponent of having a universal screening process to see, did we capture all of our students in that process? So it could be at a first grade level, it could be at second grade. We would determine if we have the allocations and the resources to do that. Could we screen all of our kids to ensure that we have all of them? Secondly, we have to ensure teachers have the appropriate training and there is an expectation that students are receiving their services. I have a child who was deemed gifted. She still had issues in terms of other areas. And sometimes I think teachers who see the gifted label on a student think they're gifted in everything. That's not the case. My daughter had some struggles in math, and I would get frustrated when she would get pulled to do gifted services during the math block. So we have to ensure that we're working with our schools to have the appropriate training, but also have the awareness that, hey, when students that are labeled gifted have challenges, how are we addressing that? I also think there has to be a wide variety of experiences for students to meet their individual and their uniqueness. So what can we do to expand as much and often as possible? I know some schools were able to offer a full load of gifted services at schools, and some may have to go to and travel to another school. That's been an experience of mine where they didn't have the gifted certified teacher. So I want to encourage teachers to get that gifted certification so that we can replicate those gifted, or at least have them in the schools where the students are and not have to find them in different, travel to another school. And then, of course, just in terms of the experiences that students are we really challenging our students? Like, that should be the key. It shouldn't all be just fun and games, and I've seen that, again, with my daughter, where she went to gifted class and they did some pretty little project. How are we truly giving them some relevant experiences that are going to challenge them and really activate that giftedness that's inside of them? So I would look at what are we actually doing for our students in terms of activities and the professional development that teachers are actually implementing in the classroom.
Thank you. My next question is about talent management. What is your immediate plan for teacher, substitute, and bus driver recruitment?
Okay. The bane of, I think, many school districts' existence right now is recruitment and retention. It is a critical issue. We can't deliver a high-quality education unless we have high-quality staff to deliver that. And what keeps me up at night is this retention issue. 83% of teachers are leaving within the first 5 years. We don't have a recruitment problem. You can't fix a retention problem through recruitment. We've got to figure out ways to keep our teachers in the classroom. But I'll start with recruitment. In terms of recruitment, we've got to create some pathways for them. Be creative around grow your own programs. We need para to pro programs in our schools. We need to start identifying students who are interested in the profession so that we partner with higher education. We do that in Hillsborough County, where we have specific sites where kids can choice into and take that program. If they commit to finishing their degree in education, we offer them a contract and a job. I think when you have interns that are in our schools right now, they need to be placed in areas where there are a high number of vacancies, and we need to encourage them to be there and stay there in those schools when they finish their internship if they're successful. I think, too, we got to reduce some of the barriers. I'll give you an example for alt certification. We have over 550 teachers participating in alt cert. That comes with a cost. It's about $1,800 to go through the alt cert program. We took it upon ourselves because we know this is a tremendous issue for us to offset that cost so that we can attract more people. When they successfully complete alt-cert, we're going to reimburse their cost, and that reduces that financial burden and that barrier for people who are skeptical because they don't want to commit to having to pay that. So reducing barriers is a critical piece. I do think we need a comprehensive talent management plan. And what I mean by that is so often we onboard teachers in that first year, and we give them a lot of training, and we say, here's your ABCs, this is how you do things, and then we really don't touch them after that. What are we doing in year 1, year 3, year 5? There should be a comprehensive plan so that we're touching base and keeping them in our system and not, leaving us. I also think, too, we got to address pay. We have to be in Tallahassee advocating for more pay, and I'd be committed to doing that. We've done a great job in Florida of that starting teacher salary, and we've made a lot of strides. Still not there. The cost of living has gone up, insurance has gone up. We got to continue to outpace that, and I think pay is a huge, huge piece to that. We got to give them opportunities to grow. Professional development, they can't get stagnant because that's when they decide, I'm going to go take this opportunity outside of education. And then just making sure that our principals are attuned to the teacher experience. We do a lot of things around customer service, right? We talk about the customer service experience. Well, let's talk about the teacher experience, and are we attuned and have the resources to help them during those just daily trials? How are we supporting them and equipping our principals and our assistant principals to keep more people in the trenches? In terms of bus drivers, same thing. It's all of those pieces we got to look at. How do we keep them? How do we grow? Give them growth opportunities. How are we supporting them? How are we paying them? All of those, I think, are really important.
Thank you. My next question is in regards to safety and security. What is your experience with emergency management plans and processes in a district?
Thank you. Again, I'm a big believer in physical hardening. Like, we have got to ensure that our campuses are safe. There should be perimeters around our campuses. There should be single points of entry. Everyone should understand that threat continuum and what happens when we're in a lock-in, a lockout. I'm a big believer in training and practicing those drills. I know there's required drills, and those need to happen consistently, and there should be accountability for that. So our safety and security division should be monitoring that very closely. I believe in the youth mental health first aid training. I'm a big believer in making sure that there are systems and processes so when things break down, we can go back and we can actually do, an autopsy on what didn't work, so that we can strengthen those things. So my experiences have just been working alongside of our safety and security chief and talking about different scenarios that happen, how are we addressing them, how are we deploying services. So if a crisis happens at a school and there needs to be a mobile response team that goes out to assist with the staff, assist with the students, all of those pieces are in coordination. I've been a part of those decisions and how that's coordinated, so I feel comfortable with that.
Thank you. I'm actually going to skip down to a community engagement question. What role or roles do you see parents playing in public schools? And specifically, describe any community involvement program you believe has worked successfully for you. I can repeat that.
Okay, no, I think I got, I will say, and there's been challenges with what programs have worked with parents, but PTA is I'm a believer in PTA and having parents help in that case. The first part of the question, one more time, so I'll make sure I answer it completely.
It says, what role or roles do you see parents playing in public schools?
I think now is a great opportunity that we need to seize. I have not seen the level of parental awareness in education in my 20 years that I've seen now. This is a great opportunity for us to really take and partner with our parents. I think they should be actively involved. They should know what's in our classrooms. They should know what's in our libraries. They have every right. It is a taxpayer-funded institution. They are taxpayers. They trust us to take care of their students, and I want them to be highly involved in the process. Because when something happens academically or behaviorally, I want them right there at the table too. Because we're just an extension of the community. And they've got to understand they have responsibilities as well. We take care of ours, and we do that in partnership with parents, and we're transparent about it. We don't try to hide things. But we also know too that parents, you have a responsibility as well, and we're there to support you in that. We connect them. We have a FACE community, a family and community engagement division that works really closely with our parents and supports them with things on how to support their children through school, FAFSA completion, what are the acceleration options in our district, educating them on that. And now I think with just the heightened awareness that parents have about education recently, we need to seize upon it. Let's take advantage of it.
Thank you. I do? Okay, thank you. Thank you for here. Okay. My last question is on fiscal responsibility. You alluded to a lot of this during the other board members' questions, but what is one strength that you have in the area of fiscal management?
Systems.
Okay.
Systems. I think when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry, if you don't have systems, things are going to break down, and that's when we start to have a breakdown in trust with our community. So I would be committed to making sure I'm evaluating the current systems in place. I have not heard of anything in terms of financial deficiencies of Osceola County, and I'm more attuned to that now, having walked into a $150 million deficit. So I would be very cautious in that transition plan, or cautious. I'd be very, I would discover how things are happening and having those conversations, and seeing if there's opportunity to strengthen some of those systems in place. There should be checks and balances, and I think I have a keen awareness in how to do that, so that I've never over budgeted or ran a deficit in any of the budgets that I have, and just being a fiscally responsible leader is what I believe is a strength of mine.
Thank you.
Thank you. We still have about 15 minutes left on the interview process, so I will first ask if you have any additional questions for the board member or anything else you'd like to share with us.
No, I don't know if I want to close yet. Is that, we can close? Well, I do look forward to our time together tomorrow in our one-on-ones. I do have an overview and an overview about myself personally, and a transition plan, which is in very much a draft form, even though it may look like it's completed, because I'm a true believer in collaboration. So things that are in here, I would want to work with the board members to truly know, am I getting everything? Or is there something I need to be aware of? So I'll pass these around, and we can talk more about that during our one-on-ones. I don't have any specific questions. I think those I'll wait for our one-on-one conversations. I just want to say, as you make this important decision, I do feel that my experiences, my track record of success has prepared me to step into the role of the superintendent. It's been a very unique time in education. And the lack or the vacuum of leadership that is occurring at the superintendent level concerns me. And that's one of the reasons I made the decision to apply. I see Osceola as an absolute ready to take off district. I know that the essential pieces are already in place here. And I think as a board, collectively, we can put the systems, the structures, and make the right decisions for the staff, for the students, and the community to move us, what I believe, as a top-tier school district in the state of Florida. I think of all the students that are in this district, and knowing that I would be bringing two of my own children into this system, you would have my commitment, my dedication, and you would not have to worry about the students of Osceola County, because they would be in good hands with me in the position. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for consideration.
Thank you. The previous candidate did have some follow-up questions, and I want to be as equal as I can with everyone, so I'm going to ask the board members if they have any additional questions. Yes.
So, Mr. Connor, it's very apparent you're a very sharp guy. You think like an entrepreneur. You're a systematic thinker. I have a lot of notes about your character as a leader, right, which I think are evident. All those things are positive. Are you also a good person morally and ethically? What can tell me a little bit about that, because we don't hear a lot about the personal thing, and I think that's as important to everyone in our district as how good you are as a leader.
Well, I'll tell you, and it was one of the written responses as well, I think, in the semifinalists. I do lead by example, and I do believe that integrity is everything, and transparency is very important. I am a man of faith, and I do believe in a higher power, and I guide my principles based on my faith, and I think that the decisions that I make are moral, they're ethical, they're made with integrity, and I can lay my head on my pillow every night knowing that I did the best that I could do that day, and I would be committed to continuing that. That's just the way I operate. And so, as a person, that's what I'll share. There's much more personality and things that we can get into, but that's a big important piece. My faith is a big important piece of my life, and my guiding principles are derived from that.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One is a follow-up, and one was similar to the other one. Because you mentioned about school improvement plans, holding principals accountable. Because one thing I noticed by you saying that is we do have these plans, we approve them every year, but I never look at the variances. You know what I mean? At the end of the year as a board, we just say, okay, here's a new one. I didn't look at the year past and say, hey, did we achieve those goals? What's missing? What is that principal level? And I know that's at the superintendent level, but I think at the board level, you kind of want to engage me too, because if you want to adjust the budget to go to a certain allocation, I want to see where that money's going, and I want to see that ROI. What's your thought process on sharing the variances of the school improvement plan with the board?
I think as much and often as we can communicate information that you're interested in, we got to make time to do that. I'm committed to meeting with you one-on-ones, workshops, regular board meetings, obviously. Any platform that your preferred style is to talk about these types of issues, that's my job and responsibility, to keep you well-informed. And so I have a process that I'm familiar with when to talk about those variances in school improvement plans. I call them lead meetings, where we meet with principals and we talk about these specific goals, what was the progress, what support's needed. I bring the cabinet into that conversation to talk about how they're supporting that principal and meeting their school improvement plan, because it's not on the principal only. It is us as a district. We're in service of schools. Those conversations and the outcomes of that, I would be more than willing to share with you as a board member so that you have a full picture about our way of work and where we're going.
And then my last question is, recently we had a sales tax. The county couldn't pass a sales tax on their own when they tried to do transportation infrastructure. But the second sales tax involved the schools to participate, and we required an interlocal agreement for us to get together. But unfortunately, we never even sat at the table, and the decision was made for the county commission to receive a higher percentage of those funds. So my goal is, I want somebody to advocate for the schools. And sometimes we have two cozy relationships that sometimes we don't want to upset the apple cart. And I mean so in a respectful manner. But how willing are you to go to the county commission, or let's say law enforcement wants to triple our salaries for the SROs? How much of an advocate are you going to be for the schools to sit there and say, oh, you're going to be dedicated to the best interest of us? And are you willing to have those difficult conversations with the county? The interlocal agreement, are they growing too fast? Are you willing to tell the county, hey, slow down the number of permits because we got to catch up? Things of that nature. How far are you willing to respectfully engage with other agencies that may not be helping the district?
I would say, first off, I need to spend time in the community. I need to build those relationships. I need to build trust with those elected officials before I can make demands. So I think it's important for me to come into the school district and start to build those professional relationships that are going to allow me to have these types of conversations. I am committed to making sure that the district gets the resources that they need in order to appropriately function as a public institution. So I'm not afraid of those conversations. I think context, timing, how you go about doing it, the professionalism, the relationships and building those so that you can have those conversations are really important. So I hope that addresses your question.
Thank you.
Ms. Cahoon and Ms. Booth, do you have any additional questions? I have a lot of questions, and I'm not going to open that
Okay.
today. You and I have an appointment at 7:15 tomorrow, so be ready. So I will, I think, with no additional questions, we'll conclude this interview. And thank you so much for being here. We'll see you tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more? How much time do we have left, just in case, just to respect time?
9 minutes.
And okay, I sit on the Congressman's advisory board for selection process for students who want to get into military academy. And I always wanted to end with this. Why you? I got 4 applicants. Tell me why, in 2 minutes, why we should select Mr. Connor and why I shouldn't even consider any other applicant. Why are you the best person to lead the school district moving forward?
Well, thank you, and I'll go back to my closing. I hate to repeat myself, but I do want to make sure that you understand that I feel called to this position in this unique moment in time because I feel confident in my experiences, the track record of success that I have, being able to repeat that in a medium-sized school district of 40,000, taking that to 225,000 students, the 7th largest district in the nation, moving the academic rankings, leading the state in CTE, FTE for 2 years straight in the last 2 years. All of these data points have led me to believe I know what it takes to help a district succeed. I know how to build relationships. I feel that's a strength of mine. I've been called approachable. I've been called collaborative. So taking all of those experiences, knowing all of the things that I've done to set up systems and structures, gives me the confidence that I can walk into the position of a superintendent, day one, ready to know what needs to happen to move the district forward.
Thank you.
Good?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.